Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Scrubbed In Show. I hope you've all been keeping well. This week we have with us another guest. We have with us Konrad Dobschuetz, who is the National Director for the NHS Innovation Accelerator, as well as the Chief Enterprise Officer at UCL Partners. Prior to this, he spent a large degree of his time in the pharmaceutical industry. So we are super excited to have you on the show today, Konrad. How are you?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me. Don't mind me drinking my coffee while we chat.
We did a bit of snooping around, looked at your LinkedIn, listened to a few of your podcast episodes, and we want to hear the origin of your career, the story. I know you had big positions at Pfizer, Novartis, but tell us, a young Konrad, when you are getting your feet wet, entering the world of digital and marketing. Tell us about that. Let's start from there.
Do you mean when I still had hair in my head? That's all gone or about to go. So thanks for the question. Thanks for having me. It's really great to be here. I started off actually my sort of entrepreneurial journey started in school when I was doing my A levels, and I'm not gonna tell the whole story since then, but just to pick something up. When I was 16, I've opened my own company in school. So we used to organize concerts for people, and funny enough, heavy metal concerts.
Oh, wow.
Like proper, long hair, and I did never had long hair. But we had a few heavy metal bands, and I have a few friends that are in that space. Yeah, so we just charged some tickets and organized some stuff in the late afternoon, and get people to listen to some music, and would do a barbecue, and all that money goes into the school, like into doing stuff culturally. It was never for me, but that was my first exposure to entrepreneurship.
So that brings me on to a question. Me and Ams had this debate literally last week. Do you think entrepreneurship is something you are born with, or do you think it is something you develop?
Yeah, great question. I think I don't usually call it entrepreneurship. I call it gift of the gap. And that's, I'm afraid you're born with that. But you're born with that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because seeing opportunity when it arises is difficult to learn. And you know what? It's okay that not everybody can be and should be an entrepreneur or have the gift of the gap. Because quite frankly, you need collaboration of a whole host of different characters to get stuff done. You need people that are late adopters or that come along, and then actually very often it's the later people that actually do the hard craft and do the work, right? Whilst the entrepreneur and innovator is already flying high somewhere else again.
I agree. And thank you for reassuring people that you don't need to be entrepreneurship. I know we talk about a lot of entrepreneurs on the podcasts, but everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. There are other skill sets and avenues to go through.
Abdul, if we're all entrepreneurs, in all honesty, who's going to increase productivity in our country? Nobody.
Yeah.
Because we're all running around with ideas and nothing is ever going to happen.
No, I agree. You seem to have this entrepreneurial trait at a young age. Tell us a bit more about your working career. What were the first few roles you did, and why did you choose to go down that path?
Yeah, I think the biggest sort of experience I had in a younger life was running my own company in Germany. And that was, funnily enough, I didn't look like it. It was a fashion brand.
Oh, wow.
So I wasn't the designer, and but I did everything else. We did that for about 6 years. And that world, fashion retail, is such a special space to be in on both ends of the spectrum, right? It's rewarding, but on the other side, it's the most backstabbing sector you can ever work in. So I managed to survive that for 6 years. But then the company went bust in 2009. That's part of entrepreneurship, right? Admitting defeat. And there was no more money in the system. The banks, I don't know how old you guys are, but you've probably know this. 2008, there was no more money for anybody.
Yeah.
And the banks stopped lending. And in fashion retail, you live off the bank. And that's it. And if the bank says, well, we now need 5 more criteria fulfilled for you to be able to finance your production loan for your orders, and you can't, you're done.
Yeah.
And that was literally done. Yeah, but that left sort of the biggest impression, that whole journey there. And what also left an impression is then how I got to the UK by packing everything in a van, my ex-partner and I at the time, and then my little dog, Lily, with a van over to England with £500 in the pocket and a flat paid for 2 months in Streatham. And that was it. No jobs, No, nothing. Because I felt strongly, or we at the time felt strongly, we need to get out of Germany, get out of the country. It wasn't, still is not the nicest place to live. I'm going to have to say that. And you just wanted to go.
Konrad,
So,
what gave you the confidence to be able to pack up everything, move to a foreign country with only a few £100 in your pocket and know that you'll be all right?
do you know what? I can't remember. I think it was a choice to be able to be the own master of your destiny, or to be beholden to other people's decisions. And I, for one, don't want to be in the latter category. I just want to create the path for myself and for people around me, so that there is you can always stand up and say, I decided this for me, and that's the thing, and I can stand by it. But if you sit there and wait for something to happen to you, you might not like what happens to you. So it was really the initiative doing that, and that convinced me that this will work. But look, I mean, up to hindsight is a beautiful thing. It could have all gone completely wrong, right? I mean, in the UK, I started working call centers for £8.50 an hour to be able to pay the rent, but that's okay. It's fine. You're high up and you're low down again in life. And I don't mind. And that's why I've got huge respect for everybody that does any kind of job. I would never judge somebody that does a certain job by the job they're doing, because there's a reason why they're doing it.
Oh, wow. So, to be fair, I didn't expect to hear any of that, actually. And it goes to show, when I see you, or what I've seen so far, is you have this big senior leadership position. You worked in big pharma companies, and I never once thought about what is your journey? How did that origin story start? Which I think will surprise a lot of our listeners. And I'm actually glad you shared it. Having worked at the call center, what were the next few career moves you did? How did you kind of get more into digital marketing? What were the roles?
So I worked out of that space, and I worked for Ipsos Mori, which a lot of people know. And I actually had to do the journey from Streatham on the hill all the way to Harrow on the hill with trains and everything. And that took me every day about 5 hours in total for £8.50 an hour. Yeah, makes you laugh. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, after that, I worked a bit of other jobs as well, like for an events company and this and that. But the biggest break I got was moving into e-commerce. So a company called Digital River, they're still around. I cherish them a lot. And a lot of people that I work with are still there, and they're doing great stuff. And it's a SaaS provider. And I was client marketing manager, basically, for Canon, G Healthcare, a bit of Microsoft, a bit of this and that. And that was the first, when you call like corporate digital experience. I mean, in the fashion time, the fashion brand, we were the first ones that had a Twitter account, right? And all that stuff. And we had an e-commerce shop that we built. But that was sort of a little bit here and there. But the professional thing happened in Digital River. 4 years I was there. Quite a journey. So working across like B2B, B2C as well. And there are these things like, I don't know if you guys know this, like B2B2C. There's also B2B2B.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you got all sorts of stuff going on in that space. But that was the first sort of corporate TE piece plus digital.
What happened next? So you're there for a few years. Why move on? If this was your career break, why did you decide to move on? Career progression, better pay?
Well, I mean, better pay was one thing, although Digital River does take good care of its employees. But do you know what? I've got one. It's a benefit I have, but it's also a problem. I get bored easily. And I just got a bit bored after 4 years, and there was no immediate sort of career progression from where I was. And so essentially I went out in the hunt for something else. By sort of accident, landed in this sort of agency land, where I then worked for the vast majority in and with Mastercard. The point is, Abdul, that there is a lot of skills that are transferable. Like gift of the gap is one, right? But how to create partnerships, how to corral people around a certain problem to fix or a cause, and that never goes away. I never knew anything about really e-commerce before I joined Digital River. I knew nothing about fashion before I opened the fashion brand. And I knew nothing about finance before I worked for Mastercard. It doesn't matter. The sector doesn't matter. What matters is the attitude and the soft skills you bring to the table. So that was 2 years. And I had Mastercard was pretty cool. I had a pleasure of working on activation of Champions League and a bit of this and that. And they've got sport assets and the Brit Awards. The agency is called Big Group. And they're still around. It's a great company. So, but ultimately, agency land wasn't for me, right? And that's for me again. Look, this is a fair statement. You're gonna have to see where are your limitations. If you go against your own gut feel and your limitations, you're never going to be happy. So I survived pretty much for 2 years, I have to say, and then went into pharma, which you can talk about.
Just before we touch on that journey, I believe when entrepreneurs, they founded their own company, there's always an itch to go back. While doing this, did you, at the back of your head, think, I really need to get out, I really need to start another company? How did you balance that?
So I've got a stat for you. Over 50% of health tech entrepreneurs are in their 40s. Okay, I'm 43 now, give my age away. I know I don't look it. So there is you've got all that experience and then you say okay, I'm going to do this now. I currently don't have the itch and I never had it again. The reason why that is I think I need a bit of stability in my life. And then within that, you can explore and do certain things, drive business, whatever that is. I think I found it out for myself. I kind of need that stability. Otherwise, it just gives me sleepless nights and drives me mad. What's important to acknowledge is, for example, when the business went really bad in Germany and we had to close down and stuff, that was from a mental health standpoint, it was really tough period as well. Really tough. And it took me a while to get out of that. And I just don't want to go back to that space ever.
I think in the world of entrepreneurship, we always talk about the glamour, getting onto the podcast, the TechCrunch newsletter, and no one really talks about how difficult and lonely it can actually be as well. Thank you for highlighting all of that. The next phase of your career goes into the world of pharma. What I want you to talk about a little bit is, before actually going into the world of pharma, what were your thoughts about pharma before even going in? And then your thoughts during the process of you getting into it, and then your process as you were in pharma. Talk us about the different viewpoints that you've had.
It won't come to you as a surprise, and that was a leading question, as I'm sure, that my perception about pharma wasn't the best before I joined, right? So I remember talking to my brother who lives in Germany the week I joined Pfizer, great company, great CEO. And I told him, look, I'm going to start working for the devil. And I will never forget that, right? And of course, my view has changed, right? Because you learn and you're actually less ignorant. So I would call this ignorance, saying that. But that was my general perception, right? So the initial drive working for Pfizer was because I wanted to do something else. It was a good opportunity and I needed the money. There you go, right? I didn't join out of conviction. And I think only sort of in the process of the first sort of year in Pfizer, I started to like the culture. The people were really dedicated. And then you sort of get these nuggets where you feel like, actually, you know what we're doing here makes sense. But I also want to highlight, in my 6 years in pharma, I always had a leg outside. I never stepped fully into the pharma world. And I was quite transparent to everybody I was working with, because you need to have that eye of what else is going on and where the influence is and what do other people think. Otherwise, you get the tunnel vision. And then what?
You mentioned you had one leg out. What does that mean? What were you doing?
I wasn't making money somewhere else, but it's more mentally keeping a leg out. So listening to other voices as well. Maybe not the ones that call pharma a devil, which I'm not too keen on anymore, but especially around the COVID crisis and the impact actually pharma has delivered there. But more making sure you have a viewpoint and you can put things into perspective. You know, I mean, a pharma company, life sciences company is there to serve people who don't that much for saying that, but it serves the shareholders, right? That's what, because it's a corporate that has a quarterly earnings, and that's what that is. But also, without pharma, we would have a child mortality rate of about 50%, right? And a few other things wouldn't work quite well. And our life expectancy would hover around 45. So let's just be clear, right?
No, absolutely. So, Konrad, talking a little bit about pharma, the reason why I asked that question, right, is so I'm not affiliated with pharma. I am a doctor by background, but I've never worked for them, no sponsors, nothing like that. Now, with pharma, right, so they are responsible for a lot of the innovations that have been brought forward in healthcare. And recently we were at the HET conference. There was a really interesting discussion about the industry and whether there should be more collaboration between healthcare and the industry, i.e. pharma. Now, obviously, what you've just said about pharma, right? Everyone's got these misconceptions and preconceived ideas. They're just fueled by so-and-so, whatever they are, right? And we often forget that. What about the innovations they're responsible for? How do you think we can, first of all, is collaboration a good thing between the industry and healthcare? And then how can we get more collaboration going forward? Because the healthcare needs innovation going forward. We need innovation to serve that demand that's being put on the system. What do you see here?
Thank you. I definitely think there is a case for more collaboration between industry. And industry for me is not just life sciences, i.e. pharma, it's also medtech, the Medtronics and Boston Dynamics of this world, right? So, because more and more, and then emerging health tech companies as well, the big guns of this world, for a few reasons. Number one, knowledge exchange. I think that's a key piece here. And when I was working in Novartis, heading up the biome there, we'll speak about it in a bit, but then also here now in my new role, it's all about translation. So there's a pharma speech, and there's an NHS speech, and there's a health tech sector speech, and and that needs to be translated. So I always think if only we were to speak the same language. And this same language is as much as two countries that can't stand one another. If they don't talk, and if they don't put a translator in the middle, they will never understand each other. And ultimately what's going to happen is they're going to throw bombs at each other, right? And here the bombs would be lack of collaboration, more pharma companies moving out of the UK, a drop in the relevancy of the UK life sciences sector, less clinical trials, fewer jobs, prosperity drops, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And honestly, guys, we see that. It is starting to happen. So we need to do more for it not to happen. So I'm just want to be clear. I'm not wanting to open the floodgates for the NHS to be privatized. It is a public good, and it has to be a public good. Without the knowledge and the financial means of life sciences companies, we are not going to be able to solve the problems of our time.
Absolutely.
I agree. And I imagine this goes on to your role at Novartis. How do you get that translation happening? Where are the platforms it's happening? Because we talk about these conferences one day, amazing, everyone's high, and then 2 days later it disappears. And it's again, these spikes with no meaningful change. What would you say are practical steps to getting to that kind of collaboration and those open comms?
Abdul, clear answer, money. That's the only language here. So what I'm advocating for, this is me as Konrad speaking personally, so I'm not speaking on behalf of the NHS, obviously, is a shared approach between industry and the taxpayer to accelerate adoption of health tech in the UK. And actually today there was an announcement, 30 million funds for health tech adoption and acceleration. Personal opinion, is 30 million enough? No, you need another zero, and you need to do it annually. Okay.
Yeah.
But the point is, the burden shouldn't be just on the taxpayer. It should be a shared burden. Why? Because if the system, like an academic health and science network, an HSN, like the one I'm working in with 50% of my job, or any other taxpayer-funded innovation entity solves pathway problems in early diagnostic for cancer, why wouldn't a pharma company pay for that as well? We're solving their problems as well. And I've been recently at a roundtable, Chatham House rule applies, with some colleagues from pharma organized by the ABPI. And I've asked around the table, and everybody said, well, for me, it's early diagnostic is the main problem. And it was basically 80% of them. So when I asked the question back, so why are we not collating this together? And with system, you put in the same money that Department of Health puts in. We create an adoption fund and we solve problems with 2-3 vendors nationally.
Yeah.
That moves the needle. That accelerates early detection in cancer in particular. And that can solve a problem, not the pilotitis that we're seeing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Konrad, what about, so I was also discussing with another friend of mine, what about not just on the solution aspect? So when a solution does come out, right, and it is a commercial product, what about also sharing the rewards of that commercial product with the guys who provided data in the first place? Do you think that could ever happen? So say the NHS and the public funded bodies provided really good data, pathways, etc. And from that, an innovation, a drug or something came out. Do you think they then have a right to some of the profits? Because so it goes back into that sort of ecosystem of also supporting further innovation.
But here you need to split out two things. You need to split out innovative medicines, which quite frankly, I'm not here to talk about, right? So that's not my spiel, but I can talk about health tech. Right. And I think there is a case for probably not an equity play, but a royalty play. Because look, I mean, and you know this, what happens to UK entrepreneurs and innovators that also through the NHS Innovation Accelerator, we help to increase their maturity and get their adoption and scale in the NHS. But look, what the majority of them does, don't blame them. They go to the US and to UAE. But where did they get their innovation grants from? SBRI, this here is you guys paying for that. People listening, us talking, we all pay for this. So for me, there's a fair point to say for a certain amount of time, if you've benefited from these taxpayer-funded programs, you should look at a royalty scheme of playing back stuff in system and actually giving back, right? Because some of those companies are very, very big now, rather large, actually. And some of them are going to be large. Like we've got on the NIA alumni, like Orca, Patients Knows Best, Health Navigator. The list is endless. And all these companies are making really well. And I'm also not saying they're making it just because of the NIA or an SBRI fund. But the doors were open. They got a push. Then they made the right decisions. Fine. But give some back.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's glad you echoed it. I think even in the head, Hassan Chodi was chairing the session, was talking a lot about co-creation, co-production, everyone benefiting in the ecosystem. And like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be equity. It can be royalty, revenue, access to information from pharma as well, right? Not just us giving to them. And I think that brings us on to maybe some of the work you did at Novartis. Tell us a bit more about Biome, and then we'll talk about kind of your current roles.
Oh, absolutely. Pleasure. In Novartis, I was brought on in 2020, leaving from Pfizer, to head up the Biome, which is their innovation lab. I headed that up for the UK. And I had a team as well. And that was the interesting bit. It was a combo role. Again, I like two hats, probably. I don't know, because I get bored easily, right? So heading up that innovation lab, but also heading up a team that actually works on what we call customer solutions in Novartis. So creating joint workings or now collaborative workings with NHS entities from a pharma standpoint. So at any given time, the team that I looked after, a brilliant gang of people, a lot of them are still around there, creating over 100 ongoing collaborative workings with the NHS. With ICSs, trusts, providers, whoever. And I learned so much there. And speaking about sort of that translation, which we had before, and then how this is done, sometimes it's around trust and transparency. So if a problem emerged that Novartis in a certain brand, in oncology, whatever, had to solve, what we would do, we would try to find a vendor that could help with that. Famously, we did a heart health call out where we were trying to find non-invasive lipid testing. So non-invasive means no blood, okay, but any other body liquids. And turns out we didn't find any. But what the point, and I'm not going to talk about brands here, of course, but one of the problems that Novartis had is how to identify patients that have a certain LDL-C, I think, over a certain level, but do that in the home in a more agile fashion. So ultimately, these patients can be potentially eligible for a Novartis treatment, right? That's usually the chain. Is that translating of that need from pharma to the outside world, making sure they understand what we're talking about. And then whoever comes in, making sure that what they're talking about is understood from a trust level, as in, hey, they can actually help us and their solution makes sense and it has legs, into the ethic and compliance frameworks in the pharma company. And trust me, you do not want to rock up at the ethic and compliance hearing, I call it hearing, in a pharma company without being properly prepared. They're going to just rip you apart and you're going to run away crying. And rightfully so, right? Because they want to make sure patients don't get negatively impacted.
Yeah.
I've been a few times there, Pfizer, Novartis, and I don't want to go back into these meetings. I'm scared, right?
No, definitely. That then brings me on to a nice way to kind of end the pharma journey. You have been working in the private sector per se. Why then switch into healthcare, NHS innovation, UCL partners? And I know you started both roles at the same time, I believe, with this double hat.
Yep.
So tell us a bit more about that transition.
So, I mean, this is by sheer chance, right? So Novartis was going through a bit of a change curve, and I didn't feel like that I want to be part of that change, and that's fine. That's a personal motivation to do that. And I just browsed the internet, as one does these days, and I came across this sort of dual role, national director and chief enterprise officer, right? And I just clicked on the contact and got in touch with Chris Langs, which is the CEO here in UCL Partners, with the PA, and we had a chat, Chris and I. And the first thing, and he would second that, the first thing that I told him, that I don't believe in accelerators. And I still don't.
Why?
Tell
us why.
Tell us why.
I can explain to you why I don't. Tell us why. So I believe in development of people, right? I believe in access. I believe in learning, in commercial thinking. But if you wrap that into the word acceleration, what are you accelerating? You're actually giving them a helping hand, because the acceleration comes from them. So we're more like a development program that ultimately provides the maturity for these fellows and their solutions, but also market access for adoption and scale. And look, we've got 34 fellows on board now, year 1, 2, and 3, because the NIA is a 3-year program, which we're currently recruiting for, by the way. And I will say this many times again. Probably a third of them, you can see that after 3 years, they may still be in a position where they are dependent on some grants, HUK, SBRI, right? 2/3, you can see, hey, they cracked this, they're gonna make their way up, and it's a proper, sustainable business. And I tell you something, I think it's fine. You can't assume that out of 34 entities, every single one is gonna go through the roof. That's impossible. And I think already saying that my personal assessment, 2/3 are going to make it, that's way more than you would think about VC land.
Yeah.
Right? Where probably like 20% make it, and the rest is all going nowhere. So the motivation to change, and you asked me, and I do want to talk about this a bit. So the motivation to change was I wanted to be truly closer to patient impact. Because if you work 6 years in pharma, I told you about these little nuggets, but they were just nuggets, right? I want to be there when we bring patient needs, system needs, vendor, whatever, together, and magic happens. Like, for example, early cancer diagnostic, plugging an NIA fellow cited with Cytosponge, diagnose cancer in the throat and stuff, really, really well. And that saves lives. And we're not talking about accelerating or medicines uptake here. We're talking about helping people to get a stage 1 or 2 cancer diagnostic, so they don't have to take meds, or you can do it operationally and actually help them immediately, and that's it. So that emotional piece was missing. And trust me, I didn't do it for the money.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
We figured that bit.
and that's okay. Like, I hired in the journey now, in the NIA, but also UCL partner side, so many absolutely talented people, and the people here are talented as well. I don't think anybody does it for the money.
No.
We do it because we have a purpose and we have a conviction that we really want to do something about all of this. And there is a problem. And we have an ill healthcare system, right? It's limping on one leg with crutches. Let's just be honest here. And we need to help. We just need to help fix it.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I could sense the passion and the motivations. And I'm sure it wasn't easy leaving kind of those senior commercial roles in these kind of big pharma world to come and help. For our listeners who we do have a lot of health tech entrepreneurs, founders, tell us a bit more about the program. I know the recruitment is open. We're going to link it below and everything. Tell us a bit more what they can expect, what it entails.
Yeah, happy to. So first of all, if you and I know there's going to be a link as well, but if you happen to be on Google, just Google NIA and NHS, and then you have the website already. Really easy. So it's a 3-year fellowship program. It's a 50-50 piece between you as a fellow as well as the actual innovation that you bring to the table. We're a program that helps you on the maturity journey to get from where you might want to be in terms of evidence, patient involvement, health inequality, commercial viability, sustainability. Net zero is a big element as well. And we can help you with our connections and with the team as well to get to that sort of gold standard maturity where in practice and in theory, you are nationally adoptable. Is this going to happen? The national level adoption, unlikely. But what is going to happen is it opens you more doors to be adoptable, procurable, even in the space of ICSs. So, and to enable this, we're working with a variety of entities. I mean, I have regular conversations with NICE, MHRA, but also we're going to start with, this might be an exclusive on this podcast here, we're going to start with the Crown Commercial Service as well, to get our fellows that apply now, but also the fellows on the legacy fellows on their framework, because 75% of people don't get to work with the NHS that have a really cool solution because of barriers in procurement. And there's also really capable people in NHS England, Jackie Rock's team, Chief Commercial Officer. They're trying to get rid of some of that procurement red tape. And we're helping a lot with that. Market access is a key piece. We're very well linked into the Department of Health and Social Care. We're working with Greener NHS. That is going to help you if you become a fellow to create your carbon reduction plans, without which from 2028 you cannot have a contract in NHS England anymore. We are helping with health inequality assessments, again, a key factor. One other key factor, more and more, will be how many have you involved patients in the development of your solution. So PPIE, key factor. Just a bit about, is it worth applying? And applications close 22nd of October. It's worth applying if you have a solution that is already live in the NHS, at least in one location. You don't need to have necessarily a solid contract in place, but it needs to be a running pilot that has real world evidence. We prefer clinical practice evidence, which is different to real world evidence, right? So something is working properly in a healthcare setting. And you also need to have a proper corporate structure in place. Like you need to have a company and your solution needs to work. It just needs to work. What Tony Young does with his brilliant team around clinical entrepreneurship is more around the early stages, right? So I really value Tony, the work he does. And you can almost argue that the NIA, which is open to all, also internationally open, picks up some of those that are then ready to come into the NIA. Lastly, just quickly, we've got a 5 months assessment process. So clinical assessment, NICE assessment, MHRA, all those entities are going to look at your solution. There's an interview stage process. There's another 2 NIA board approval stage processes. We're doing due diligence with, as I said, with Crown Commercial Service, as well as with ORCA. There's a huge piece of work happening to make sure that whoever joins is ready to join.
It makes sense. And from the companies I saw, it's the next step up after the clinical entrepreneurship program, people that are a bit more active and live. We started this podcast with you, Konrad. We want to end it with you.
All right, okay, let's see.
What are you most excited about in the future of innovation and digital transformation in the NHS? Where can we see you in 5 years? Because one thing I have learned so far, Konrad, is you like to move on, you like to try lots of different things. So that's what I'm most interested about.
Okay. So I tell you what my dream is. So in 5 years, I want to work in the space industry.
Oh, wow.
Oh, nice.
So that's, well, why not, right? It's all about tech and innovation, and there's a rather big gap up there to explore. I'm a huge Star Wars and Star Trek. I'm one of those weird people that like both.
Like both.
You know. So there you go. I just admitted that. Don't hate me for it, but I can deal with both. The new Obi-Wan is really good on Disney Plus. Just saying. And that's where I want it. Like 5 years would be cool, right? To be there. And within those 5 years, I think what we're going to have to do is help, number one, sustain. And this sounds weird, right? But we're going to have to sustain where the NHS is right now. So we do have a two-week cancer rating target, which gets the majority of cases fulfilled. If you rock up at an A&E, and I know people are waiting, and that's horrible. But I tell you what, if you rock up with a small child and it needs to be seen because there's problems, you will get seen, right? And I think that part we need to keep. We need to keep doctors, nurses that run the NHS. It's not people that sit in offices. It's people on the ground that run the NHS. We need to keep them engaged, motivated. I'm not here to talk about salaries and strikes, of course, but we need to keep people on it. I think that's really important. And that will help sustain the NHS. Where we can help is with automation, like risk stratification, diagnostic. But ultimately, I tell you something else, Abdul, and both of you, is that ultimately the treatment is sitting in front of somebody, is doing a surgery. Are we going to have in 5 years robotic nanorobots removing cancer cells? Potentially, right? But we're still 10, 15, 20 years off from that become accessible to lots of people. So we need people, right? And they need to stay. So that's probably the key focus here. It's not so much about generative AI and no, it's not. It's just get the basics right and make sure people stay.
No, I agree. One of the questions I wanted to ask, and you touched on it, is there is so much innovation, so much cutting edge tech, but the core of retention, recruitment, the workplace culture is struggling so much. And what you said, I agree. It's about sustaining what we have now and just, keeping it. But thank you, Konrad, for sharing that. This was, I have to admit, a podcast. You took it in a very different direction, which I didn't expect.
Good.
Yeah, which is always interesting. And the one thing we do find from listeners is you are in leadership positions. And when people know your own personal story, your own career journey, your motivations, it assesses or changes the perception they have for the organizations people run like yourself. So these are very important, and it's a privilege for us to share it. So thank you once again, Konrad, for taking the time out to share your story.
Absolutely welcome. And again, call out to innovators to apply to the NIA.
We will do. We will link it for sure.